It happened much sooner than I ever expected. It was fall, and I went to pick Penelope up from daycare just across the street. She had just started learning to crawl. And I walked in to pick her up, and the daycare worker said, "Guess what Penelope did today?" And I was ready to hear about some cute new antic, because some of the parents know what's coming. And they said, now that Penelope knows how to crawl, she started pulling the non-crawling baby's hair and stealing their toys. I say that because it's amazing how early it starts. Not to call my baby out, but Palm Sunday just puts me in a mind to really reflect on human nature and how young we start to want other people's things. Or, here she is, 9 months old at the time, and she was an assailant and a thief. I'll feed her, and she'll have food on her plate. But what's on my plate is what she really wants, even though it's the same thing, right? And as soon as I offer it to her, as soon as it's not off bounds, she's good. She doesn't need the thing that isn't hers. That's the way we are, isn't it? From a young age, as soon as we develop personalities. And I say all that because it's all of us. It's in all of us. The little cherub that bounces in my mother's arms has everything. She brings joy to the people that love her, but she also hurts people. We bring joy and love to the people we love and are in relationship with. And those are usually the very people that we deny and betray. And I think it's good to take a moment. The Episcopal Church is really not into guilt and shame, which is good. But I think there's a lot to be said for some honesty, just in ourselves, to know that all that happens in the Palm Sunday and the Passion Gospel, it's all of us. We all betray, deny, abdicate power. We're all afraid, desert. We do it. And God knows that. And it levels the playing field, right? Like there's nothing you've done that is so much more awful than any other human being. We are all people. And we are all broken. That's part of the deal. The other thing that I've been thinking a lot about, particularly this Lent, of course, is on my own heart, is the situation in Gaza. But you may have your own situation that you hear in the news. The thing that troubles you every time it comes on, or you read it, or you see it on TV. The thing that breaks your heart, that's going on in the community or the nation or the world, and you feel powerless. Powerless to stop it. And it breaks you. And the reality of the Passion Gospel is that is true for all of us. That is true for our humanity. Again, it's part of the deal. I was thinking of Pontius Pilate, who, whatever you say about him, it's easy to want to villainize certain people, and I'm just not interested in that because all these people are all of us. And Pontius Pilate, he was the one in this situation, it would seem, on the outside that had power and control and authority. But you know what? He was afraid. It fell out of his hands. He didn't want to riot. He wanted to keep public order, which actually are not terrible things. But he felt like his hands were tied by systems that were functioning beyond his control. That if he released this innocent man, there would be a riot on his hands. What would happen to him? He felt powerless. And I don't know about you, but listening to the news, it's easy to feel powerless. And it's hard to sit with that. But I think this is one day of the year where we can. And I was struck for the first time with that strange little anecdote about the young man following Jesus wearing a cloth. I've always kind of laughed, and the crowd catches hold of him, and he runs off naked. And all I could think is, that's all of us too. The emperor has no clothes, but it's not just the emperor, it's all of us. And we would rather flee than be exposed. So we take off. And so this Palm Sunday, I think it's an invitation to acknowledge both of those truths. Both of those truths that we are broken and we feel powerless. Not only to acknowledge that, but to pray it. To say, God, this is where I'm at. You know all that's in my heart, all that I'm not proud of, all that I'm ashamed of and I carry with me, all of my betrayals and denials. You know it. And you know how helpless I feel. And then the next, third, and final thing to do in response is to act. Is to act in whatever way we feel is faithful. As faithfully as we possibly can. And you know what? Doing that, praying, and being really honest with ourselves and acting will not protect us from failure. We're gonna fail. That's also part of the deal. But God takes that failure. God works with that failure. Thank God for Peter, because I love that guy, man, because that guy, he breaks my heart because I am Peter. I have all these great ideals. I am with Jesus all the way except for when I'm really, really tired. Or I'd rather do something else. Or any other reason. And Peter's failure, his betrayal at that moment, in that action it looked hopeless. It looked like a failure. But you know what? Peter's story has kept me going for almost 40 years. Every time I fail, I'm like, well, not the first one. Jesus knows what it's like. And Peter is restored, actually, on the other end of this story. It's not the end of the story. And that's the other thing to bear in mind, that as these people were living through the chaos and the fear of these last days, of this Holy Week, they were living in chaos and fear, like for real. They didn't know what was going to happen. Well, they did. They knew Jesus was dead and their movement was over, and that they betrayed their friend. And that the vast majority of the disciples left him in his hour of need. That's what they knew. That's what they knew in that moment. But that's not the end of the story. It never is the end of the story. That whatever we do, even up to and including the end of our lives, we do not know what God is going to make of it. We do know that God is in the business of restoration, of transformation, of hope, of resurrection. And it's in the mess and the failure and the despair that God shows up. In fact, that's all God has ever done. That's what God does. And 97% of the time, as we are working through our lives, aware of our own failure and shame, and feeling too small and insignificant, like what we do doesn't matter, 90% of the time, that will feel like that's everything. But then there's sometimes those moments where there is a glimpse, where you get to see what God is doing. You won't see the whole story because nobody ever does. But let me tell you, I was 23 years old, little girl from Western New York, and I went to a war zone, and I went to the occupied Palestinian territories, and I saw evil there. And I saw the terrible things that people do to each other, and I came home from living under the Israeli occupation broken. And I farmed, because that was all I could do. That was all I could manage. And for the longest time, I was like, what did those 3 years even mean? And what did all that trauma and hurt and pain mean? And here I am, almost 11, no, it's 14 years later now. I've done My Name is Rachel Corrie, but it's a moment. I don't know where it's gonna go, but I'm finding a voice and I'm finding a way that my experience 14 years ago, God is using that experience and transforming me. God continues to transform me, and I trust that transformation changes other people, changes the community, I think. But it's not about me, it's about us. And this is true for all of us. Whatever we do always feels like too little. But it's not. It never is. Especially in God's hands. Always in God's hands. And the truth of the matter is, that is exactly where we are. So I invite you today to be fully present. To be fully present with your mess, with your brokenness, with your powerlessness, and realize all of it is absolutely true and none of it is. Because God is in the story. And act. Act as if your life depended on it. Act as if the community's life depended on it. Act as if the world depends on it, because it does. We follow a God who took 5 loaves and 2 fishes and multiplied them, who takes a seed and makes it a tree, who takes some yeast and makes it a loaf. God's got whatever little brokenness you have to offer, and God will transform it. You don't have to. All God needs is your broken offering. That's it. That's it. It's God who does the work. Amen.